Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Joining me today is Father Nick Shorey. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
We're going to be talking about evangelization, and I think it might be good to kind of define the word. When we hear evangelization, oftentimes we equate it with evangelical or Protestant type of movement. But what does the church mean when we use the word evangelization?
I think what we mean when we use the term is any opportunity or any program, any effort by which people who are coming to church have an opportunity to deepen their faith, to learn more about who we are, what we do. It also for us means those efforts that extend beyond the walls to people who are searching, to Catholics who may be hurt, or Catholics that are just trying to figure out where their life is going, and the church can somehow enhance that. So basically it means an opportunity to grow internally, spiritually, and also to grow in numbers, although we're not always concerned with numbers, but to bring people into a faith family in such a way that it has that it deepens the meaning of their life, their family, their work.
You mentioned something about deepening one spiritually. Mm-hmm. I've oftentimes found that to be important and most important to people when they're searching, because there's some kind of emptiness that they may have. Mm-hmm. And usually the emptiness that they have is a diminishing of the spirit within them. Spirit's always within us, but why is it that spirit gets diminished in people's lives, in particular the lives of Christians?
I have a great story. I had an opportunity to talk with a young man it was at a wedding, and the family had gone to the cookie table, so it was just the two of us. And he said exactly that. Life is good relationship with my kids, we're doing all these things, but he said, something's missing. And so he asked me what I thought, which is very dangerous. And so I knew him well, knew his family. So I said, I've known your family well. I've known your grandparents, your parents, and I know you. And your parents and grandparents have invested a lot of time and energy in church, spirituality. You, on the other hand, have been somewhat missing from all of that. You're doing good things. And I went on to say to him, my question is, in what are you rooted? What is your life rooted in? And I think that's a less offensive way to say to people, where is that spiritual rooting? And it gets distracted by good things, things that we do with our kids, our family, things that are enjoyable, sports, energy, things of the world, of our culture. But they can take us away from being really rooted in something that is a little more than the superficial things that we oftentimes spend a lot of time and energy on. And in evangelization, there comes a time when I think we have to figure out how to appropriately say that to society, say that to people.
There's kind of cycles that we Christians kind of go through as we're growing up, especially if we've grown into a very dedicated Catholic family. There's that sense that we go through sacraments, we go through Christian and Catholic education, we understand about the faith, but then we get to a certain point in our life, I guess it depends, individually it's different for people. Sometimes after confirmation, that person rarely comes back to the faith until maybe they want to get married or they want to have a child baptized. So there's cycles that we go through. What interrupts those good things that were rooted in us that somehow goes by the wayside? What are some distractions, I guess?
There are always the distractions of a secular world But I think part of it is maybe an odd definition of distraction, in the sense that what happens to us from, say, those times of confirmation to where we are is that we are actually growing and maturing as people. And what we fail sometimes to do is to adapt our sense of church, our sense of God, to where we are in the maturing of who we are as men and women. And we understand, as priests, what you would do with a situation now, after X numbers of years of being a priest, would probably be very different than how you handled it 20 years ago. And I think sometimes what happens is we are distracted by things of the world, but I think also what we fail to realize is that I'm not the same person that I was 20 or 30 years ago. But we try to function the same in the sense of faith and religion. And we don't adapt it. And I think that is somewhat of a distraction, maybe, in the sense of our failure to understand the development of who we are as men and women, and that we are different.
And I think, to carry that a little further, sometimes there's a tendency to kind of stop the growth in one's Christian faith. Mm-hmm. We get to a point where we think, I know all that there is to know. I'm getting too old. I can't learn anything new. This is how we've always done it. So, those are things that really stop us from growing. Yes. And there's that whole sense that the Christian life is an ongoing learning process, and how important that is for evangelization as well.
Very true, because when you go to a parish and say, do you want the parish to grow? And most people say yes. Okay, these are some things that we're going to have to do. What you run into are many people who say, well, I like what we got. I'm satisfied. So why would I want to change any of this in order to bring in other people, or, because I'm content. So I don't want anything to change, because what we have, I like. And so we do become complacent, and in doing so, we oftentimes don't take the next step in our personal growth or the growth of a parish to evangelize. Because you're right, this is fine.
We're down to about 2 minutes of our first segment. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I'd like us to talk about briefly, and then we'll carry that through into the second segment, is the whole sense of, when we think of evangelization, we think of it's all about preaching the gospel. Is that basically what evangelization is in a nutshell?
I think it is our ability to share faith, and in doing so preach gospel. Because the most effective tool of evangelization, as we're going to maybe see in our next segment, is to personalize it in such a way that we can share it, and share it appropriately, and in doing so make a connection that this is what I'm sharing is my relationship with the Lord. What I'm sharing is my understanding of God. So that is part of it. Yes.
We're going to talk more about that, but we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Light Moments. Here's Father Tom McSweeney.
Kids in New York City always have someone to talk to, thanks to a hotline run by their peers. Teens from around the city got together to found an 800 number called Youthline. It's an information and crisis intervention hotline run by high school students and college students. They answer the phones 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Teens call in to find out about events in their neighborhood, to discuss boyfriend and girlfriend problems, to report abuse, or just to talk to someone. From time to time, we all feel the need to talk to someone who's really listening. Listening with love is an important gift that you can give. It means making yourself available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Try to be the kind of person that others can call on and count on.
This message from the Christophers, New York, 10017.
Doesn't your child deserve the best education possible? Then you should consider a Catholic school where strong academics are offered in a safe, disciplined environment, where education is deeply rooted in the religious teachings of our Catholic faith, where graduation rates are exceptional, where outstanding teachers help your child reach his or her fullest potential in the classroom and in life. But you should consider a Catholic school for the most important reason of all. Your child is worth it.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Father Nick Shorey. We ended our last segment by talking about preaching the gospel, and that's somewhat of what evangelization is, but let's get a little bit more specific into the personal lives of Christians, and in particular Catholic Christians. You know, isn't there within us this call to proclaim the gospel, to be missionaries of the gospel by all that we say and do and in our daily, everyday lives?
Very much so, and that's, I think, part of the understanding of the term new. Evangelization has always been something that we have done as church. We've associated it more with missionaries. It's the work of the priest, it's the work of sisters, professed religious men and women. But what's new in many respects is understanding that it's all inclusive and that each of us plays a role in evangelization, which means that we have to come to grips with first the awareness and the importance, and also what we're going to say or how we're going to act, because evangelization is a combination of being able to say things and a combination of being able to be or live things in such a way that it's attractive. But it's very inclusive. The best example of that is many parishes have wonderful ministries of hospitality. And they're generally relegated to greeters at the door. And we fail to realize that hospitality needs to include an entire congregation. You have to have hospitality once you get past the greeter. So if the people in the pews are scowling or are not friendly or protecting their pew or staring at you because you're new, that's not hospitality, and it deflates what's happening at the door. But it also demonstrates that you've got the greeters, but you have an entire congregation that's engaged. And so too in other understandings of evangelization, that every one of us has the opportunity to build on that. Every one of us, by virtue of how sometimes we fall short, can stifle it in a parish or in the church.
You know, I've often thought that how inconsistent it is for a Christian to be sour, to be just not happy about who they are, and that's not the Christianity that's proclaimed and lived in the New Testament, and that's certainly not the Christianity that's proclaimed by the church. You know, let's go into how we call people to evangelization, and let's do a distinction between proselytizing and sharing and evangelizing, because there's a difference, I'm sure.
There's a big difference. It's an important difference, and it's a difference that many people, if they don't understand it, they fear. We are not called to proselytize. We are called to evangelize. And perhaps the best way to distinguish the two is most experiences of proselytizing involve anger, criticism, being nasty, perhaps attacking either an individual or a church, where evangelization is sharing in love, respect, and the sharing of good things, not so much criticizing another or certainly going at them. And I think that's a very practical way to make a distinction between the two. We are called to evangelize in love about good things in an inviting way. We avoid proselytizing, which means we don't attack other churches, we don't attack other people, we don't go at it in a nasty, negative way. And I think that's a pretty good distinction.
Let's move up now to our time and space with the new evangelization that was called for by Pope Emeritus Benedict, and now with the joy of the gospel with Pope Francis, and this whole sense that what we are to be about is our way of life as evangelizers, as people who have understood and heard the gospel, and then in turn we share that gospel in how we live and what we do and what we say. How can we best do that in our time and space right here, right now?
I think going back and looking at what Francis is writing about, because when you read the document, it's full of an attractive spirit, a creative spirit. I would say that what you get out of that document, the two things that strike me most is his emphasis on joy, being happy, being a person or a congregation that someone would want to be with. I float to many parishes, as do you. We have both been in parishes where congregations are fun, exciting, and you want to be a part of it. And then there are congregations, with all due respect, that are not the happiest people on the face of the earth. And sometimes as Catholics, we aren't the happiest prayers. We pray very heavily and very seriously and very dolefully. You don't get the impression that we are being fed in a joyful way by our experience of God. Joy is one thing. The other thing that I think is important is being creative, a creative spirit. When we celebrated Pentecost this year, one of the things that struck me most was, are we a creative church? And that means being daring, definitely thinking outside the box, and not assuming that the model, the organizations, the effort that we have put forth in the past are the efforts and the organizations and the spirit that we should be taking into the future. So I think very practically, if you go to joy and creativity, those come directly out of that document.
We're going to talk a little bit more specifically in our final segment about some of the things that are really happening locally here in our diocese in regards to the new evangelization and the evangelization efforts. But let's go back to that whole sense of learning something new. You know, how often is it that we do learn something new in our daily lives, and how often should we be open to that? And how often do we kind of like put up walls at times, and how detrimental those walls can be for the work of evangelization?
I think we should always be looking for something that is intriguing or something that is different. And even within our own parishes, you find that. Not all parishes and not all Catholics are the same. I think we think that we all are the same, we all do the same thing, and the truth is we're not. We're very diverse. We're diverse from county to county, from parish to parish, and sometimes I will go to a parish and they'll say, we're having trouble with this. This is a great challenge for us. And there is always a parish that I'm aware of that is doing a really good job in that regard. And so what I will say to them, have you ever gone over to St. So-and-so's to see what they're doing? And they'll say no. And there's almost sometimes a resistance to go over to a neighboring parish or a parish in another county to find out what they're doing. So I think that that's an opportunity that we have to be constantly looking at what are others doing, where they're having good success. Is there something that I need to try to deepen my own spirituality or my own experience with God, even if it's a little scary, even if it's a little difficult? One of the things that God bless him, Bishop Hughes used to say was there were two things that he used to do, even though he disliked them immensely. Every year he would go to the opera and he would go to a ballet because he just felt that there was something there. And I think we have to be willing to try different things, even though we may not like it, but to see if it has something to offer us.
We're going to talk more about that and some more things, but we're going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Mark Quinn. As I grew up on the south side of Chicago, the Dominican Sisters of Springfield not only taught me, but formed me in my Catholic faith. The sisters worked for very, very little. Now as they've gotten older, they have no savings to fall back on. And we benefited from their sacrifice. And I think it's time that we recognize that much of what we are today, we are because of what sisters did for us. It's our turn to help them out in their hour of need. They don't ask for a lot. They embrace the simple life. I owe them so much. That's why I make an annual donation to the Retirement Fund for Religious. Do you remember the religious men and women who shaped your life? Say thank you to them by donating to the Retirement Fund for Religious at your local parish. Join me. Share in the care.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
Welcome back. We're talking about evangelization. Before we took a break, we were starting to get into some more practical and up-to-date things that are happening right now here in our diocese in regards to this new evangelization. Let's start on a very positive note. What are some wonderful things that are going on and taking place in our parishes?
In a number of our parishes, some of the more wonderful things are attitude. Men and women who are excited about going out and sharing what is happening in their parishes. In many of our parishes, there are wonderful and serious programs that are ministering to the needs of a lot of people. We aren't good at PR. Not enough people know what our people in our parishes do. So what they're starting to do is to become more vocal about it. They're telling people what we do in very creative ways. We have parishes that have had access to television. They're doing that well. Advertising, billboards on highways. I was in a parish a few months ago where the local radio station asked them if they would be interested in doing some spots on a weekly basis. And I said, do you realize the evangelization opportunity you have there? So there are some very creative things that they're doing. They are pounding the pavement. The most difficult thing to do with evangelization, but the most effective thing is door-to-door visitation. Few people like that. But we have parishes that are really good at that. And they don't mind knocking on doors, inviting people. They don't get into debates or argument. They just say, this is who we are. We're from St. Mary's, and we're here to help you in any way that we can. And then they move on. So they are doing some very down-to-earth evangelization in the sense of programs, be it visitation, be it answering questions, inviting people in, having dialogue with people with no hidden agendas, just listening. Listening is an aspect of evangelization that a number of our parishes have undertaken in a very powerful way. Just listening to people's stories and asking, is there something we can do about that?
Let's go back to that sense of a one-on-one personal approach, because I really do think that is the key to evangelization. You can't just send someone a letter. Mm-hmm. You have to actually talk to them one-on-one. And if we go back to the life and the events and the times of Jesus, that's exactly what he did. He met people face to face. And how important that is. I remember as a young priest, and even a few years before that in the seminary and as a deacon, helping out in a few parishes that were doing census for the opportunity of looking at creating a whole new parish in the area, and how important that was to knock on the doors and to ask people what their faith tradition was, or if they belong to church or any church, and how important that is, because there are people that are actually just waiting to have this one-on-one personal experience. Do you think that there are a lot of people that kind of fall through the cracks because of that?
Very much so. You're right. Letters, even phone call, is not the same as sitting down face to face and talking to someone about that. And a number of our parishes have been pretty good in creating opportunities where people can come together and share a common story. So that has been an aspect of evangelization that some parishes have had some real success in. But you're right. And the truth is, when we get calls about a problem or an issue, and you offer to sit down with someone, to listen to the story, to help them in any way that you can, that makes a tremendous impact. I have found it to be extremely true in Catholics dealing with the issue of annulment, marriage annulment. That is a very big, monster in a way. But when you sit down and say, tell me your story, and then this is how I can help you, they leave, I think much more reassured that maybe I can do this, and they understand it from a very different perspective than just giving them a brochure and saying, call me when you're ready.
Sure. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the youth, the young people. One of the complaints that I hear often in parish is that we're not doing enough for our young people, or there's no young people coming to our churches. What do we need to say in response to that?
When we did the assembly of a few months ago now, one of the aspects that I was very serious about including was including the opinion of the youth of our high schools and the young adults often on our college campuses. And I had people come up to me and say, well, why are you doing this in the high schools? And it was like, I need to answer that for you. People assume that high school kids or young adults are either, they have no experience, that's one of the things I hear, or they're too young, or they're the church of tomorrow. Well, first of all, they are tomorrow's church, but they are also today's church. And while they may not have a lot of experience, they do have experience of God. It's a big distinction. And so it was very important to include them in that process. In our parishes, what we find that there are generational differences that are very important to keep in mind, and we have to deal with that. Young kids today are different than when we were in our younger days. Society is different. They are pulled by many factors in society who want the young adults and youth. And so the demands made on them are more than the demands made on us when we were that age. So you have to respect that. They also have different issues. They have different values than most of our older Catholics. And sometimes that's challenging. What is a sacred cow to an older Catholic may mean very little to a young adult or a youth Catholic today. And so there's some tension there. They live differently than we do. They have different values and different issues. And so somehow we have to be able to listen to that. And we have to be able to turn over the reins when it comes time. We've seen that in our church, where people don't want to give up control. Yeah. And especially to a younger person. As a young pastor, you probably felt that when the older congregation, all of a sudden, you walk in and you're 20 years, younger than they are. It's tough sometimes to accept that. Yeah. So it's tough for congregations and parishes to accept the fact that while they say they want more of a presence of youth or young adults, to actually give them, to turn it over is another story.
We have 30 seconds left.
Yes.
Just a final comment on evangelization.
A lot of work to do ahead of time in our future, but I think people are becoming more understanding of why and how. And so it's been quite a few years of getting us to this point, but I think that while we have a lot of work to do, it's a good road ahead.
Father Nick Shorey, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.